Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. Well, it is finally, if you're in the Midwest, it's finally beginning to feel like spring. Not summer, but spring. The weather has been warm, but it seems like every other day we are experiencing rain. I'm going to ask my favorite weatherman who's here, John B. in the place to be. John B., what are you thinking about this crazy weather we're getting?
It hadn't occurred to me that we kind of skipped spring, but we did. We hit like 90 degrees, 80 degrees, back up to 90, and now we're kind of mellowing out into that mid 70s to 80 range, and we're getting rain all the time. So.
Yeah, I think we're doing a retrograde. We're going back. What would a seismologist say about this weather? About us, it would be a midsummer retrograde to spring, because that's what it feels like. Every other day it's raining like crazy. But if you're out there, hopefully you're enjoying yourselves, and everyone else around the world and around the country is experiencing record temperatures. Yesterday, which was June the 23rd, they had record temperatures. I guess the hottest day on Earth ever was on yesterday.
Really?
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And so in certain places, people are actually dying because it's actually summer weather and it's really, really hot. But here in the Midwest, as you know it, we love to get 90s in spring and 70s in the summer, and freezing cold in the winter. There's no place like home. Let me click my heels 3 times so that we can get back to things. But for those of you who are out there and you are just zooming about your day, we hope that you are having an amazing time. Hopefully this year, all 3 weeks of it so far have been, is it just me, Jonathan? But does it seem like we're moving at like warp speed through this year?
It's gone pretty quick.
Now they always say that when you get older, so I'm thinking like maybe I'm getting older. This is what they were warning me about. When you get older, the time goes by faster. But do you feel like it's going by faster?
Not really.
Are you serious?
I think this year's been pretty much consistent with what I've had last year.
I'm nervous.
I don't know.
I'm a little bit nervous for myself, because now that means I'm officially old. Or I think that you're the only. Everyone that I speak to is saying like how fast time is flying, and oh my gosh, it's moving at warp speed, and you're thinking it's going at regular pace.
I'm just taking my time, enjoying the ride.
I think it's because you're like a groundhog and you never leave this place, and you're in here, so every day just seems like one big day.
That might be. They all just blend together. And
man, but if you're out there, I am hoping that you're enjoying yourselves, you're being safe. I'm just thinking about like how, like after the 4th of July, it's like time to go back to school. And that's what I was thinking, like it's almost here. But anyways, we're done with that. We're going to enjoy the next 3 weeks of summer that we have, and we're going to continue to just do great things. So I am here once again. I'm excited. We've taken a bit of a hiatus. We'll call it our mid-spring summer break. But we're back now, and I'm excited today. Today, we're going to be talking about dealing with microaggressions. And it's interesting because when I went into the studio, I never get such a great response from Jonathan today. He's like, I don't think I agree with your premise. I was like, wow, great. That's amazing. So we're going to have a great show on today. But as you know, we always start by talking about like what's hot off the press. And so, we're going to talk about it. The entire world is talking about it. And we'll be doing so for the next, 9,900 days, whatever it is, until this next election takes place. Those of you who know, we have a new lame duck president. Sleepy Joe has finally woken up. He's eating the apple or whatever it is. He's gotten a kiss from Prince Charming or Princess Charming. And he's now come to realize that there's no way he was going to win a second bid for president. He has ended he ends his campaign. It's not a suspension of a campaign. It's
I guess, yeah.
Okay.
He transferred it. I don't know.
before we get into, well, I'll bring it up because what you just said made me think about something else, and it's about the finances. So we'll talk about that really quickly. But President Joe Biden has ended his campaign, and in less than 30 minutes later, he comes back and he endorses Kamala Harris as vice president. And because they didn't want to seem like a coronation that they were doing, they waited a whole 3 days before they pretty much made her the presumptive nominee, allowing her to call a few cities and talk to some delegates because the Democrats have a delegation process. She went and she worked hard in those 3 days
I'm sure she did
to secure the delegation. And so now she is presumed the candidate. She will be, I was going to say coronated. She will be accepted as the nominee, or the what do you call it? She's going to be accepted as the
nominated.
She's already nominated, kind of, right? Didn't Joe nominate her?
No, well, she will be.
What is it called? The
confirmed as the Democratic Party's nominee.
There you go. That's what it's going to be. That's what she's going to do. So anyways, it's been really interesting. It has been interesting. I'm going to put it in context. So she raised the first day like over $50 million, $49.6 million or something like that. $100 million raised in 48 hours. I mean, this is like record-breaking numbers. This money is really interesting, but I do have something that I want to say as to why that takes place. She's received enough delegates, as we said, to secure the nomination. And I think that Republicans are kind of shook, my thought personally. And so now she is trying to figure out who her VP will be. Now, I'm going to say to you that I think that the timing on this is really interesting. That after, I'm going to tell you what happened. Okay. If you guys want the inside secret, this is really what happened in the Democratic world. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I'm an independent, but I got inside sources. What happens is that little lady out there that everyone talks about, Nancy Pelosi from
is that the Nancy Pelosi noise?
That's the Nancy Pelosi. Y'all, I like Nancy. I'm going to tell you, there are certain politicians that I respect. I'll say it like that I respect their game. Both on the Democratic and the Republican side. They just got the juice and they know how to make things happen. Mitch McConnell, he's one of those, they know how to get stuff done, right? So she went in, everyone else was like, Joe, please, you're gonna kill us. Joe, please drop out. Joe, not to the left, it's to the right, And so nobody could he wasn't listening. He was becoming a crotchety old man. I don't know. I'm the only one who can beat Donald Trump. And when I said that, I thought about Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, by the way. That's the picture, the image that came to mind. So he wouldn't listen to anyone. And so Nancy came out and she says, Joe, you're about to ruin it for everyone. Oh, that sounds more like, what's her name? The lady who used to do the cooking. Julia Childs. Yes. I got to work on my impersonations. But anyway, and she had that conversation, because she is the Don Dada of the Democratic Party still. People don't realize it. And she went in and said, Joe, we're going to give you 36 hours. 36 hours. We're going to give you 36 hours. We're going to either you step down or we send in the big weights to take care of it. And so he's like, I don't know. What am I supposed to do? I keep saying that I'm here. I don't know. Tell them you got COVID and go hide for 2 days and then come back. I'm telling you, this is how it went down. And then she left. She went back to California. Everyone was like, oh, well, he's going to continue to run. And then what happens? He gets COVID. He makes an announcement through a letter, which was weird to me. Because if you have COVID, it doesn't mean that you can't use computers. And if you're doing okay, why not just send out a message to the whole world but anyways, so he does it. They make the announcement. He coronates Kamala Harris as the next person who's going to run. And that's really what it was. Come on, Democrats, let's be real. It was a coronation, y'all. I mean, and he had to do it because you only got so many days, a couple of weeks before the convention comes. So that is what had to take place. So that happens. Everyone falls in line. This is what they do on both sides of the party. Nobody wanted Donald Trump again in the Republican Party, because there's the conservative movement, then there are the Trumplicans, which is the MAGA world, and then there are the Republicans, Ronald Reagan Republicans, that feel like they've been held in a headlock, hostage by the situation. But they knew that if they went against Donald Trump, that he would then send all kind of everybody who had to run, he'd send his people in, and it would be just kind of chaos. So they said, what, he's going to go with them. We love him. They kissed the ring and everyone fell in line, just like they did on the left side. So that is where we are right now. And so my question, John, is like, what are your thoughts of a Kamala Harris ticket, her at the top of the ticket? What are your thoughts?
I think Joe had a better chance of beating Trump. I think Biden had a better chance of beating Trump. I think it's interesting. You mentioned the timing of it in terms of the conversation.
Right after the convention is what I'm saying.
I'm saying right after an assassination attempt on Trump fired up the Republican side now, and that was going to be a sure win for Trump after that. Now it's, okay, we got to shake things up on the other side, and I don't know. I don't think that's the reasoning behind it at all, but I think it's interesting, the timing of things.
No, and I'm not going to say that you're not onto something. What I also think is interesting is I'm saying the timing around the convention. I may not have said that, but just the fact, because they were just, and I watched the convention, and I think, it was what I expected. I was kind of surprised by JD Vance. I thought he was a little bit demure. Is that the word that I want? He wasn't as fired up as I thought that he would be. But anyways, I mean,
and he needs to be. Think of why Mike Pence was there.
Yeah, exactly.
It was there to be the Republican.
Yeah, and so the so the other issue that I see there is that he talked a lot about himself and his story and those things, which you can't do that when you have a lead party person who is used to being the celebrity.
You absolutely can.
Yeah, you can.
No, you can.
You said you think you can?
He's there to get everybody else. He's not.
I don't think so.
No?
I think no, because let's look at this guy, okay? And we're gonna get back to this Democratic Party. And if this is what the first segment it is, so be it. Because we need to talk about this. The world is waiting for us to talk about this.
They need to know our analysis.
So this is the thing. When you look at, what JD Vance has said concerning Trump, everyone who has finally kissed the ring said about Trump. Comments like, he's America's version of Hitler. That's extreme. When you look at all of those things, and then then all of a sudden, when he becomes the guy that no one's going to beat, that everyone realizes, we gotta turn this thing around. So you got people kissing the ring. Then you had people that are in pursuit of power that would sell their souls to the Grinch, I guess, in order to be in power, that were doing this. And so when I look at JD Vance, he is a different person than he was when he was running, when Trump was initially in office, and the things that he was saying. And so I think that now the reason he was accepted was because of the fact that he became morphed into the most like Trump. And so I don't think that there's enough spotlight for someone to have too much space on his stage with him, unless you're saying Trump is amazing, he is great, he's going to be the greatest president ever, he needs to be back. Unless you're having that conversation, I don't think that there's much oxygen in the room for anyone else. And so yesterday, I think that he shared his story. Everyone's been talking about, what's the name of his Hillbilly Elegy? Been talking about his book. Have you read it? I'm sure
I have not.
You've not turned the pages?
I don't read. I can't. I don't
know
how.
It was interesting, and I think probably his positioning has made it more interesting. I'm interested in just kind of some of the things that are in there now. But it's going to be interesting. No more there are no more Ronald Reagan Republicans out there. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So that was one of my things there. But then when I look at the other side of this, I want to say this. This is why I think that some of this excitement, it was inevitable, right? Because the Democrats were dealing with the situation in which they were seeing their entire political landscape like really heading for the Dead Sea. going, full steam ahead. And so, but the problem was this: there's a lot of people that would have voted for Joe Biden, I think, that are independent, and a lot of Republicans, I think, as well, if he just didn't seem like he was going to kill over like within the next 13 weeks. And so because of that, a lot of, I think, people retreated to their default, which, hey, if I'm a Republican, I might as well vote for Donald Trump. We can stomach through him. He's not the candidate that I would want, but I can't vote for this guy who I don't really believe is capable for doing what it is that he's supposed to do. So I think that we have a lot of Republicans and independents and even Democrats that were like looking like, hey, we might vote for Donald Trump. And so I think that there was kind of this land swell going in that direction. So just the entrance of anybody new. I mean, and this is to no offense, Kamala was not my favorite person on the planet, but I definitely would not do my sister this way. But it literally could have been Mickey Mouse on the other ticket. And I think that there would have been an excitement like, we have someone who's alive. They're going to make it for the next. And I think that that would have generated interest. Like, we actually can go to the polls and vote for someone, who's alive. And I think that's going to give, and I think we'll see some transitioning. Folks who are definitely not for Trump, like I told you about those parties, those Reagan Republicans, who I consider the Republicans. Then you got the Donald Trump Republicans, and then you got those conservatives, some of them who often move all the way to the far right. Some of them move into that Trump MAGA place. Some of them may even be even further than that, but that are now have something to vote for. And I think that you'll see some movement there. And I don't think it's necessarily because, oh, we love Kamala. I think it's just like, okay, now we have a viable person who's there. She's been in the office. The world still lives. We may not like some of her policies, which I think a lot of people would probably say, but she is someone that is not going to destroy our systems and the things that we value as a country. And so I think that's my personal take. Now, what's going to happen with her vice president? What does she need? Does she need a hillbilly LG for her vice president? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I hadn't really thought of it. I heard Whitmer's name being thrown around, but
what would that look like?
It gets thrown around irresponsibly, I think. I don't think
she's one of the key people.
No.
But what would that look like? Two women vice. I don't think the world's ready for that.
I don't know about that.
I don't think the world's ready for that. Well, I don't think Americans are, especially American men. I just don't. I think that is a big change, and I think that there's a whole issue that I think Whitmer, the situation with the Palestinians in the Detroit area, what's going on. I think the Jewish guy that is from, is it Pennsylvania? I think he's problematic. I like the Illinois guy. He is interesting, but I think the choice is going to be North Carolina. I like Kentucky. If she's going to have the guy from Kentucky, I think he's kind of like a
I think
Cooper or Kelly. There you go.
I think she needs someone with a history, and
what kind of history
that can give, like Joe Biden had 40 years in public service or whatever.
There's a whole bunch of those in Washington, D.C.
Well, she needs some. She's got the likability. I think she's got the personality there. There needs to be someone there for. This is the policy. This is the grounding factor of this ticket, kind of thing. And I think there's plenty of people out there that could fill that position.
That's going to be interesting. So, anyways, that's that situation. That is currently where we are in terms of our politics. It's interesting. I'm interested to see how President Joe Biden, excuse me, he phrases or shares his story of why he stepped down. I told you guys, I gave you the inside scoop. It was Nancy Pelosi all day. She said, listen, we're going to bring in the Don Dada came in and she said, we're going to bring in the heavy guns. If you don't do it, we're going to do it for you. And so he decided that he's going to get COVID, and he noticed he's back within 7 days. See, I guess quarantine is only 5 days.
I thought he just had a really good ice cream cone on National Ice Cream Day, and that opened his eyes to, I could just do this every day. And I don't have to go through this politics garbage anymore.
No, you got to pay attention to what's going on. All right. So also, I want to talk about this, and this is really kind of crazy. We've had so many of these situations that have come up over and over and over again with law enforcement. And I told you, I'm not one of those defund the police people. I work in various capacities with law enforcement. I come from a paramilitary and military, family. And so there is a great respect that I have for folks who put their lives on the line. And being in situations where I've actually seen these people in work has been amazing. But what is interesting is that we continue to have these situations now. A Sonia Massey, a 36-year-old Black woman who called the police because she thought she heard someone outside the home. They get there, and it is so weird what took place. Have you seen the video?
I just watched it before you got here, and it's a weird interaction. It looked like they were done and they were going to leave.
It was the weirdest thing. And, she says, and you guys have to see the video. I mean, they don't show the actual shooting on the video that I saw, not on the one that you saw. Did they show
I saw the
actual shooting?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I watched and I saw her go down on her knees, but I didn't know if she got shot while she was standing or she was on her knees or what took place, or maybe I missed that moment, which thankfully I am because I don't need to see anymore.
I think NBC had it.
Okay. But anyways, it was so weird because it looked like the end of the situation. And she said, hey, take the water off the pot. So she's following his instructions.
Even before that, they're outside the door. They say, hey, we checked around. We didn't find anybody.
Then they come in the house.
And then it's like they continue probing. Hey, have you taken your are you all right mentally? And she goes, yep, taking my medication and everything. Okay. And then they ask to see your ID. After everything, they ask to see your ID, and that's what brings them in the house.
And that was weird.
Yeah.
But see, these are the interactions. So when folks are talking about the issues with the officers, it's like, why? Okay, when you get pulled over, why are you pulling me over? Can I see your ID? Those kind of things. Why are these interactions happening in the first place? And this is a really weird one when you think about this interaction. And so it goes from there to say, hey, you got a pot on the stove. Take that off. We don't want anything. I have a situation where burning, your kitchen's on fire. And she goes and gets the pot, and he says, oh, we're standing over here because, we don't want to get hit with that water. And she says, I'm going to rebuke you in the name of Jesus, which.
When I first read that, I figured she's yelling it or something.
Yeah.
No, it was just an offhanded,
I'm going to rebuke you in the name of Jesus. It was kind of like a joke.
Yeah.
And what? Oh, and he goes crazy. And, when we look at it, and I just sat there and he was talking about, oh, don't do this. And then I was like, is this guy demonic or he's like possessed by something? She says Jesus, and he starts, oh my effing God, and this and that and the other. And before you know it, she's like, trying to fend for her life. What was crazy was even after that, I think it's interesting. She called them, and this happens. But even after all of this happens, he says, I'm not going to have somebody throw boiling water on me. He starts to get his story together. And then in talking with another officer, he says, I was in there and she came toward me and came at me with a pot of boiling water. I'm like, okay, so what video? Like, did he realize that his video would be looked at?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a conviction out of this. No doubt.
This is murder.
Yeah,
it is absolutely murder. And these things don't do anything good for the relations between officers and communities of color. These are exactly, you hear the cry, say her name, and in reference to her and others like Breonna Taylor that have been out there. We've got to begin to do something different. I don't even understand what can be done differently in this situation. There's a story that he had been employed at 5 or 6 different police officers in the past police departments in the past 3 months. It's kind of interesting to see what's going on 3 years, 3 months, whichever it was. This is not going away. It's not getting better. We've got to do something, and policy and laws are important. this guy is guilty. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. So we are having such an interesting time. A little bit ago, we were having a conversation on how DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, the anti-movement against DE&I, which is MEI, merit, excellence, and intelligence. And so as we were having that conversation and we were looking at how things are unfolding with the new person that's on at the helm of the Democratic Party, Vice President Kamala Harris, as she marches toward the bid to be the candidate for the Democrats and then goes toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. I thought some things were very interesting because I was looking as like, what is going to be the initial attack? What are going to be the initial things that are said? And were microaggressions going to be a part of this conversation? And we see already that this has begun to take place. Now, I want to share a little bit about what microaggressions are for those of you who are listening and have no clue exactly what we're talking about. They are statements and things that are characterized, and some of this can be known and some of it can be unknown, but it's dialogue that demeans commonly marginalized groups of minorities. They usually attack the race. It can be race, religion, disability groups that are disability groups, marginalized people, sexual orientation, and gender, and anything of the such that would put people in what is considered a minority group. They are discriminatory in nature, but they're accepted in most societies. And these are phrases. I'm going to give some example of what we're talking about. They're accepted in most places, even ones that don't particularly identify with discriminatory values. And this term was coined by psychiatrists back in the 70s, Chester M. Pierce. But as of, I would say, the late 90s, mid 2000s, and more recently, we have been having more conversations about microaggressions and what they are. One of the examples that we have seen recently that would be pertinent to this conversation is, as we were talking about DE&I and the push from corporate America against diversity, equity, and inclusion, have come up with this new phrasing, MEI by Alexander Wang, CEO of Scale AI. This is kind of, I mean, even in its title, MEI. So the answer to diversity, equity, and inclusion is MEI, merit, excellence, and intelligence. So I say that it's a microaggression because it gives the impression that that DEI or the practice or individuals that were hired through that process are less than. They are less than and don't perform in a merit based society. They are not excellent. And in some ways, their intelligence may not fully be there. So just looking at the terms that were used to define this new level of merit-based employment, or what do you call it, a furtherance in the work process, is an example in and of itself. But what happened was, recently I was looking and they were referring to Vice President Harris as a DEI. She was the DEI selection to run for president. And I was sitting there, I'm like, what kind of racist, half-cocked stuff is this? Like, are people actually going to say this? Like, she is the vice president of the United States of America. She's been that for pretty much an entire term, because by the time you got 6 months left as president, you're back in the political campaign of running. And as we see, Joe Biden is now officially a lame duck. There's not a lot that you're going to be doing in that last 6 months, but she spent an entire full term as a vice president. She former senator, former prosecutor, attorney general. So she has had so much experience, especially when I look at the former president from the base there saying this. His experience coming into the presidency was that he was a television star and, quote unquote, questionably a real estate tycoon, if that's what we would say, a businessman with some experience there. So when I hear that, that is another example of what I would consider latent racist conversation that is acceptable, because not only did we hear one individual say that, we've heard other key leaders in the arena share those sentiments that she is the DEI selection. And I understand where they're getting this from, because the statement comes from the fact that when Joe Biden was looking for a candidate, he made the statement that he was really thinking of leaning into an African-American woman for his positioning. Now, I don't understand how that's any different than what we were talking about earlier for the kind of person that an individual would need to make their candidacy more solid. When he was running, he was getting kicked in the pants by Bernie Sanders, I think it was, when he was running the first time around, and his campaign was on life support. And he went to South Carolina and had a conversation with James Clyburn, who said those famous words, Joe knows us and we know Joe. And that literally gave new oxygen and new life to a campaign that was pretty much over. So this black statesman who had been in the ground said, hey, I think that if you're going to move forward, you would do yourself well by securing a running mate who would energize African-American women to come out and vote, because they are the backbone to the Democratic Party. That's how that happened. And so we now see that because of that, she is now considered by some the DEI. Now, what I do like is that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, came out. And I don't know if you saw him. He's like, listen, if we're going to critique, if we're going to criticize whatever statements we say against her, let it be about her record. And I would say that there's enough to fight an argument and to form a case against her based upon their record, because her record and Joe Biden's records, they are light years apart. Their policies are light years apart from what most conservatives would say are good policies. But this happens to be, and then number 45, the former president, goes on to refer to her as dumb as a rock. And these are things that people say, and so they pose serious threats to how we view people, how we come together, and already a divisive climate. I think that we're entering into a place, and you let me know what you think about this, Jonathan, where we could quite possibly have the most racially charged election of our lifetime. And I saw, with President Obama and other individuals that were there, this seems to be like it could ramp up to be something a little bit different. What are your thoughts?
I think it's not going to top the rhetoric around Obama's presidency.
Really?
Yeah, no.
Why do you think so?
Because they're going to do more to attack her competence and intelligence than they are her skin color. The comment of she's a DEI hire it goes back to why she was picked up. She was picked up to appeal to an audience because of her skin color and because of her gender.
But do you understand, by even like what you just said, like that gives no credence to her actual abilities and her experience?
No, and I'm saying that
you don't see that.
I do see that.
Okay.
I'm saying that comment about her being a DEI hire, that's kind of a one-off. That's as far as you can go with that conversation. You can go so much farther saying that she is not
Her policies aren't good.
Her policies aren't good. She, as a person, is not prepared. She's not able to fulfill the role. You can go
What
so
would
much
make her
further.
not be able to fulfill the role?
Play some of her speeches and listen to her talk herself in circles over and over and over and over, and it's like she's unable to communicate the point she's trying to get across. I'm sure as a lawmaker and as a professional, she is a lot better than her public appearances would have you believe. And when she has something in front of her that she can rely on, then she's pretty good at going down the speech. But when she's asked a question and she just has to like talk circles and not actually say anything.
What would qualify one? And I guess this is one of the questions that I have with folks who say that. What would qualify one to be ready to be president of the United States? What kind of characteristics would you think would be necessary?
That is a fantastic question. And there are different characteristics that different presidents exhibited. I think that's an interesting part of the presidency as well. Donald Trump, for example, he had very strong like opinions. He would put down what he believes, and he is not going to move. Some call that stubbornness, some call it assertiveness.
So stubbornness or assertiveness are key characteristics. What about character and morality?
Oh yeah.
What about financial?
That'll get someone elected.
What about fiscal responsibility in your own life?
And I'm not campaigning for
No, I'm just saying, but because I look at this and
I don't think that has anything to do with being president.
What doesn't have anything?
That the fiscal responsibility in your own life. I think it could be an indicator that could get someone to vote or not vote. But you asked me, what are the characteristics that make someone qualified to be president?
Well, because you made the statement that she was not qualified.
I made the statement that an argument against her is that an attack that would be made is that she's not qualified.
So my question, and the only thing I think that makes sense would be to look at the people that she would be running against. And I say that because I've never been a Kamala Harris fan. I wasn't excited about it. The only thing that I was excited about is the interesting of how people respond to certain things when they are generated. And so I knew that the surprise effect would be interesting to the process. But when I look at this and I'm looking at who has been president, number 45, who has been charged with not just the felonies, the financial crimes, but who has also had a number of lawsuits from a fake business that he ran for an academy for a school. I'm looking at the fact that he is has said things that are both racist and misogynistic. He has he's been found guilty of sexual crimes. And so when I look at it, like, are those the things that are necessary to be considered? I look at J.D. Vance. He has 2 years. And if he becomes vice president, if Trump becomes president, he then becomes a candidate for president, because if anything happens to Trump, he then would take over.
So what you're saying here?
I'm just asking a question.
No.
Yeah.
See, you asked me what qualities are needed for a good president.
Absolutely.
I said there's a wide variety of qualities, and not all of them need to be there.
Absolutely.
And now you're saying, well, do they need to be responsible with fiscal?
I'm asking you, what do those qualities look like? Because if you can say, or if the argument could be, and I don't want to put this on you, but if the argument could be that she does not have the qualities, then my question would be, what would be those qualities? And so I began to share some of the amazing qualities that people on the other side of this ticket have. I'm going to tell you like this. When I look at this race, I'm not energized by either of these candidates. I'm not excited about Kamala Harris. When Trump first came on, I was kind of like, hey, maybe he'll be a maverick, and that's kind of where he was running. But the misogynist behavior, the sexist behavior, the lack of
this is whataboutism.
Yeah. So
I laid out some argument, and you said, well, what about Trump?
That's no. I'm asking. I think it's a fair question. If the argument is,
but it's not what the conversation was about.
But it is what the conversation was about. If you say that the argument could be that she is not ready, or she does not have the qualifications, then I think that it is a fair question to ask, what would those qualities be that either disqualify her or that would validate someone being ready?
That is a fair question.
Okay.
But okay.
So that would be the question.
The what about this about Trump is not a valid question in the conversation, I don't think.
Then we'll strike that. I'll ask the question. So then what are the qualifications or the characteristics that would make one ready for the office? Because and my statement, I think this is fair, obviously, that if we were to look at this and we were to look at JD Vance as being, if something were to happen to Trump, he would have to be ready to be president. Yep. And he is 2 years into his current role. What would then validate him, and how could he or anyone else make that argument that she's not ready? I think that's a fair question.
I've never heard of him before. I had never heard of him before the convention. Like, okay, who's this guy?
So as we look at these, so the point of this is that there are these statements that are being made, and to refer to her as a DEI. When I heard that, I was like, that is so racist. Like, Republican Party, please show me that you're better than this and that you're not going to fall on this, that she's the DEI candidate because she has been vice president for 3 years. And depending on what you value and what you see, some people are happy with a number of the things that have taken place. I'll tell you what people aren't happy with is the inflation. But I said this back in 2020, you can't print checks that aren't tied to anything without inflation going crazy. And we saw from 2020 to 2023, both administrations and bipartisans passing all of these legislations, giving out money for roads and bridges and homes and people that were laid off and all of these different things. And inflation is when the chickens come home to roost after writing checks that aren't tied to anything. So when I look at that, those are things that I think that are legit. But to call her a DEI president is a microaggression. It is that thing that says you're only here because you're Black. And that is exactly, as we talk about, dealing with and coping with the issues of microaggressions. And I've had to deal with these things my entire life. Those are the things that are really a challenge because they discount the ability and the skill and what a person actually has and brings to the table through those words that sometimes people don't actually take a look at. And so that's kind of where we were going. So anyways, actions that qualify as microaggressions usually fall into these three categories, which are micro assaults and micro insults and then micro invalidations. And so when we talk about micro assaults, we're talking about these are the most obvious forms of these microaggressions. The perpetrator, the person who uses these, is aware of either their demeaning comments or actions and is not afraid to show their negative feelings towards this specific group. Micro assaults are committed when one individual uses a name and calling it intentionally in terms of an offensive dialect. Behavior to exclude a minority, such as avoiding them, is another common example. So we will just avoid the conversation or avoid you altogether. That's an example of a micro assault, or using things. And let me think of a good example of a micro assault.
Well, it's something. It's something you do.
Yeah.
This category is defining something you do.
You would actually do.
It's not
Absolutely.
something you say.
Yeah, right. It can be both. It can be something that you say, but it's actually how you respond. And so avoiding altogether is a great example. So if you were to categorize a micro assault as something you do, I would accept that. But we also understand that we can assault people with our words. And so that's why I was saying that there
are two other categories for that.
Yeah. But they the way they occur are sometimes a little different. So micro invalidation is when one invalidates a minority by belittling their experiences or their struggles. Phrases like, I don't see color or race when I look at you. And people don't realize that, but I've been told that probably a million times. Oh, I'm not racist. I don't see color. And I'm like, I want you to see me. I don't mind being seen as a Black. As a matter of fact, I want to be seen as a Black man. and everything that I possess and everything that I embody and everything that I bring to the table. And non-blacks or majority groups don't understand how offensive it is when people say, and I'm sure you may have heard people say before, like, I don't see color. I'm not tied to color. I don't see color. That is very offensive because I need people to see me because I am what I would consider a rich part of this American history. And so I want you to see who I am. I want you to see all of me as I enter a room. And so micro invalidations, they do those types of things. I don't see that. And they attribute this because they are invalidate the racial and the cultural identity of a person or color, which is not all necessary for being helpful and helpful ally. A perfect example of this is what I put in that text. We remember the Black Lives Matter movement, and then it became Blue Lives Matter movement, and they're like All Lives Matter movement. But the fact of the matter is that the pain that many blacks were feeling because of being shot or killed by police officers was omitted and overlooked with those slight phraseologies. All lives matter. Yes, but all lives are not being killed at the same rate by law enforcement. So that is a perfect example of micro invalidations and things that people don't think of. And some of these things are done overtly. The micro assaults would be an example. But these micro invalidations, I think sometimes people they're not necessarily saying, I want to, this is how I feel, but they're saying, well, it shouldn't just be about black people, but all lives should matter. And I get that. But when you do that, you invalidate or you overlook the pain or don't recognize my personal experiences and the things that I've gone through. And then lastly, the micro insulting. And these occur when one indirectly insults a member of a commonly marginalized group. Stereotypes or assumptions about their ability based upon characteristics such as race and gender are mentioned. Most of the time, such expressions include words like, you're actually, you're really articulate for a black man. Like, what am I supposed to be? You're really smart. You're really intelligent for a black. Those are things that my entire life I grew up saying, hearing. And I would always say you're very intelligent. I was like, if that's it, then let's leave it there. But when people say, you're very intelligent for a black, you're super articulate for a black man. Those are things that are very offensive because it gives the implication that I am somehow separate or an exception to the other ignorant black folks that exist out there in the world. And so as we talk about these microaggressions, I want to give us some clues really quickly about how do we deal with these microaggressions and combat them. The number one thing is going to be education. What Jonathan and I are doing here, and I love the fact that we can come in and have differences of opinion. We say this all the time. We have differences of opinion. Sometimes we'll have heated, celebrated conversations and disagreements, but we're able to talk. And then sometimes we come back after thinking about those things like, I thought about this, and not necessarily that we reverse our position, but we take what we have said into account. So I think that that's really important. Education is so very important. Raising awareness, making people aware. A lot of times we will label something racist. And I'm saying this, but I think that it's not necessarily racist, but it may necessarily be more ignorance. And so they're racist by ignorance, not necessarily by choice. And so it's important for us to ask the question, what do you mean by that? When someone says something that you think is a microaggression, you ask the question, well, what do you mean by that? And getting clarity sometimes can stop us from going down a rabbit hole that we don't necessarily have to do. Self-reflection. Everybody has biases. There are things that we look at, how we come from, our experiences, our past, but how do we use these things and how do we take a look at those things and then reflect on what we've said, what we think, and how we act with other cultures and other races? Then I always say, speak up. When you hear something that does not sound right, if you witness a microaggression, then ask them that question. What do you mean by that? It's such a very important question. Creating safe spaces. Let's make sure that we establish environments where people feel comfortable discussing their issues without fear of judgment. Safe spaces are so important. And then lastly, empathy. Let's show some empathy. Let's try to understand the experiences of those different from you. Let's listen when people share their stories. And I say that's Black, white, Puerto Rican, Asian. We've all got to spend more time listening. and less time trying to express or push our agendas forward. Thank you guys for tuning in today. An hour goes by so fast. I've enjoyed this time with you. As always, take care of yourselves and each other. God bless you. Grace and peace.